Ladies and gentlemen, coming to you from the Colonial Dungeon, this is the Court Martial Podcast! Introducing your host for this evening, he has a bald spot on the top of his head, and he weighs in tonight at a number you don't need to know. He is the Colonial Loudmouth, Sean McCarty!
Everybody, go into your homes. Don't come out for at least 16 years. Everything is canceled. Dogs and cats are mating in the streets. Ghosts are roaming the village with AR-15s and a mean attitude. While you are sitting at home quarantined, gripped when paralyzed with fear over that dreaded coronavirus, you have one single solitary semblance of solace, and that is your favorite wrestling podcast made by a smark for smarks. Welcome everyone to the Court Martial Podcast. I am, as always, your Colonial Champion, Sean McCarty. We have a lot to talk about today, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to try my best to keep this show at a reasonable length, but there is no guarantees. As you know just as well as I do that I am very, very long-winded, and I will repeat myself as many times as it takes to drive the point home, and I will do that again today, because this is my podcast and I choose what goes on it, and all of this is on the fly. There is no reading from a script, there is no additional preparation other than a couple notes here and there, and a little bit of everywhere, which is where this podcast might just go. If you're not careful, we might go places you've never even been to yourself before. But we have got a lot to talk about, as I said, so let's get right into it. And the first one is the obvious. I mean, who isn't talking about this right now? The big bad dreaded, the biggest heel to come around since the SARS epidemic of 2003. It's the coronavirus. Everybody has been freaking the holy halibut out of their minds about this virus. And now I will, as many of you can probably suspect, I am no doctor, okay? So I am not going to make some sort of expert physician's analysis here. I'm just going to speak what I know to be true. The coronavirus has cases all over the world. Italy specifically, and this was something I just found out today, 3 weeks ago they had like 400 cases, and now 3 weeks later they have something like 10,000. Although they have not disclosed the death count, but I do not think it's drastically high. We're talking numbers of cases, not numbers of deaths, numbers of cases in that country. China is obviously being completely ravaged, and as a result of China being completely ravaged, we're being completely ravaged. And this virus takes 5 days to actually be noticeable in anyone. But this reaction, this hyper freak out, quarantine, like a bunch of herded cattle who see the slaughterhouse ahead of them. I mean, it is absolutely insane. Every major sporting event, save for WrestleMania at the time of this recording, however, by the time this airs, they could have canceled WrestleMania. This is the night before they're thinking about it. Vince McMahon is talking to Tampa officials because, of course, several cases have been found in Tampa, and of obviously the safety of the fans and the talent is important. The NBA has shut down. The XFL is shut down. The NHL is shut down. Every major sporting program, pretty much anything beyond 250 people in attendance is being at the very least very strongly discouraged, or at the most completely banned altogether. And while I could easily, very, very, very easily put on a nice tinfoil hat and talk about what I suspect this entire situation and the media frenzy to be part of, it is not my place to make speculations on a podcast, so I'm going to speak what I know to be true, as I said before. Obviously, this coronavirus has scared a lot of people, have really intimidated a lot of people. However, there, I believe, are an equal amount of people who are watching this situation with a little more rational of a mind, right? A little more rational, saying, listen, there have been 20,000 deaths in the United States, at least, from the actual flu, from people not getting flu shots. My cousin's doctor just told her that the flu is, at this moment, and I say at this moment because this could change, at this moment, the flu is a much stronger cause of death and concern than the coronavirus as a whole. Now, in the next 2 weeks, if we've got 300,000 cases by the end of March, then obviously we have an issue. And that's something that we'll have to address at the time. But as far as WrestleMania is concerned, and as far as this affects wrestling, I know Ring of Honor just canceled their event. Really, this moment is going to be key for pretty much the entire world of wrestling. If WrestleMania is canceled, then that would mean a seriously sincere means that they are going to, they're going to take that financial hit. And that is a move that Vince McMahon obviously does not take lightly in any way. We talked about, we ranted pretty hard 2 weeks ago on the podcast about Vince McMahon and his love of money and the fact that money has made the booking lazy, which is still true. Obviously, that's all still true. And also, just before I continue, on the means of that there wasn't a podcast this past week, there is programming scheduled. I just didn't get a chance to do it. I also am a part-time musician, and I had a gig coming up, and I had rehearsals, and it just took too long. But if you are devoid of Court Martial podcast action, if you were busy that week, there is something you can go back and listen to, and that is the Totally Awesome Podcast's review of All Elite Wrestling's Revolution. And that is and I will post that in the description in case you want to know my opinion on that. That's where that's going to be. I will put that link in. Of course, TAW Gaming I've mentioned several times before. And I almost guarantee that their programming is not going to shut down as a result of this coronavirus. But this is the interesting part of this whole thing, right? There are so many people who are already addicted to the internet as it is, who are all gaming and really not outside anyway. And most of those people are going to be just fine because they're going to still be gaming. So this might be we may see a boom in e-federations on that basis, ones that are actually solidly decent programming. If, God forbid, this becomes something of a really serious concern and WWE and several programming decide that they're not going to run any shows until this has been handled, if that is the case and all the media shuts down and the stocks continue to drop and all of that, where the content of wrestling might just be, if it isn't on the WWE Network, obviously, because people are going to go back and still watch that, but there might be a boom in new product desired, and that might just come in the name of e-federations. And for those of you who are in the know, I used to run one of those called Colonial Impact Wrestling, which you can find all of the archive of on YouTube. I know, I'm a shameless self-promoter. I don't care. I have a podcast. I'm a smart doing a podcast, thinking that my smart opinion matters enough to have a podcast. And then I'm going to plug all my stuff. So yeah, this is kind of how you got to get your name out somewhere, you know? but to sum up this whole idea, obviously the safety of all the talent, because God forbid somebody like Ric Flair catches this thing and dies. God forbid, knock on wood. I'm not trying to make some, but it is in the best interest of everybody involved to just take those extra precautions, like washing the hands, which you all should have been doing anyway. And if you haven't been washing your hands, shame on you. That is basic hygiene. Washing your hands, not touching your face as often as you can. Taking showers would be nice. And I know that is not a given for pro wrestling fans. I know this from my time watching wrestling shows and going to wrestling shows. I know who you are. Take a damn shower. It is worth it. Straight edge does not mean straight into the dumpster. So please, just exercise proper hygiene. Be careful when you go outside. As far as big groups and big public places, obviously you're going to have to buy groceries, so you got to be careful with that. But take precautions. But also do me a favor. you do not necessarily need gallons and gallons and gallons of hand sanitizer. There is such a thing as going overboard, like the media has been going overboard with this virus. I mean, it has caused such a panic and a frenzy that is not necessary. This to me is a wait and see moment where we have to continue living our lives the way that you've been living them. And you may have to sacrifice some entertainment, yes. But there are other things that you can do to occupy your time, like watching Colonial Impact Wrestling, or going and listening to the newest album by White Knux and Abizzle called Retreat, from AB Productions, now found on Spotify and Apple Music, and will soon to be uploaded on YouTube. But right now, I think we all need to just relax. Just calm down. We don't know where this is headed. Take the extra precautions in your daily life. Leave the hand sanitizer to the older people who are actually more susceptible to this disease. Please just be careful and take precautions, but don't go nuts until we know more. And please just be careful no matter where you're listening from. Be careful, take as many precautions as you can, and hang in there, and I promise you that we will all get through this together. Because that's what we do. We've had these kind of things before. In World War I, there was a flu during World War I that killed 9 million human beings. Nearly the same amount that was killed in World War I, give or take a couple million. And I'm sure there will be some historians who can give me some accurate numbers. But there was a massive flu pandemic. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, okay? I'm not saying that's going to happen, but my point is we got through it. And here we are. And things are going to be okay. I promise you, as scary as things might seem, as scary as this thing is, just stay safe. Don't take any extra precautions don't take any extra risks that you don't need to, but continue to live your life. Now, pro wrestling. Let's go back to pro wrestling. Now that I've gotten that monologue out of the way, let's have some fun, shall we? We've got a Hall of Fame ceremony that may or may not happen, but the inductees are still going to go in regardless. And we have got quite a cavalcade of names here. And if you hear the clicking of the laptop, it's just because I'm looking at what's going on here as far as who's in it. So, first off, I'm going to talk about the one that was most recent, which was the one that came in today, which is the British Bulldog. And for years and years and years, fans have been clamoring, and I mean the clamoring is really the right word. They have been clamoring like a spoon on a tin or an iron pot to tell everybody that soup's on. It's, you know, he didn't really do much in the way of titles in WWE, but he was a good worker when he had good people around him. Like, obviously, that match with Brett was legendary. But, you know, my thing with the British Bulldog is that he was definitely... I love British Bulldog. I loved him in 2000... Or not 2000. Actually, I did like his 2000 run. When he did go in for the European Championship and the Hardcore Championship back in the Attitude Era. Seeing him back was cool. However, for as much good as there was some that was not so good. But he was... Obviously, his tag team with the British Bulldogs was great with Dynamite. They were fantastic. Really trendsetters who influenced a lot of people. Did the British Bulldogs. He was a great tag wrestler. He did some good individual accomplishments. Long overdue with Bulldog. Kind of a tragic way to end with Davey Boy. But we all miss him. We all respect him. And this has been great. In WWE, it's difficult because, like, there is no actual Hall of Fame. Although it'd be cool if they made one. It'd be really cool if they actually did make one, which I hope they do. But it's obviously it's kind of like the Oscars. It's pretty political in who's chosen, and they've tried to kind of remedy that with like the legacy wing, but like there's a celebrity wing that has people like Kid Rock in it, and and not for nothing, I mean Snoop Dogg's in it. Trump is in it. There are quite a few people you'd be surprised. What's his name? Drew Carey is in it. Drew Carey is in it. Pete Rose is in it. who was the one the other year? Mr. T. Although Mr. T at least worked a solid match with Hogan and stuff, but I know that he had an issue with. But anyway, doesn't matter. So it is obviously a politically charged, based on Vince McMahon and what he wants to do, list. And I understand that it's a padded list in that way. But British Bulldog is one. I think that really is the fan service one this year. They always choose one that's a bit of fan service where people are going, oh, finally they're in. But another one that I do believe deserved to actually go in was JBL. In 2004, when I was still an incredible, when I was still in the realm of this was still quasi-believable, just based on my age, when JBL took the WWE Championship from Eddie Guerrero, I was upset. I hated JBL. I thought he was he was great as the guy who beat Eddie Guerrero. I'm sorry, I totally blanked on what I was saying there. But when he did that, he was just great as a heel. He took the ball that he didn't, I don't think, expect, and he ran with it. His rebrand also as JBL was terrific. He really did a lot of good heel work from that time on. He was great with APA as well. He had a great career with that, even when he was getting his beginnings as Justin Hawk, excuse me. It's cool to see his progression go, and he was a guy who wasn't afraid to reinvent himself. And then talk about his commentating career, which was pretty solid. Now, obviously, there's the talks of him and being a bully and all of his backstage hoopla. When I look at a Hall of Fame, I'm looking at specifically in-ring accomplishments. That's it. JBL has the resume to be in the Hall of Fame, and I think deserves to be in the Hall of Fame on his own merits. And I'm happy for John. Obviously, he's become a bit of a controversial figure in the WWE universe, so to speak. And at least that's what WWE wants to call it, but particularly with the internet wrestling community, which I may or may not be a part of. You be the judge. It's on the internet. There is a community. You do the math. Batista's making it in. Another one deserved. I think WWE really got behind Batista when he became the Animal. He was under good tutelage with Flair and Triple H. I think those were the best two people to put him with. Orton, obviously, and he had a great chemistry, except for when they faced each other. I never cared for a Batista versus Randy Orton match. And all the time they faced each other. I don't know what it is. They were great as tag partners. They were great together as Evolution, but as opponents, it didn't do it for me. Even in 2009 when they had that match then, it was just kind of meh. And that's no knock on either guy. I like both of them. And then obviously becoming Drax, after his WWE career, and obviously his Drax accomplishments and his acting accomplishments have nothing to do with his Hall of Fame induction. However, he won 2 Royal Rumble matches, as controversial as that is. He's a 2-time WWE champion. He's the 4-time and the longest reigning World Heavyweight Champion. He is truly, and he's transcended the business in a way I don't think anybody truly believed Batista would. At least not when I first saw him. I would never have expected him to become the acting phenomenon that he has become. He's really come out of his shell with that too. And the fact that I could sit here and say Batista's going to be a Hall of Famer, truly deserved. What I don't really like about the WWE Hall of Fame, though, and this is starting to get on my nerves, is in addition to doing these individual guys who all deserve it, then you get the weird one like the NWO, where Waltman's already in with DX, and I don't really know if I agree with putting factions in. Tag teams, yes. Factions, Because if you're really inducting the NWO, wouldn't you be inducting like 600 members into your Hall of Fame? I mean, how many members of the NWO were there? How many members of the Wolfpack were there? Those are all going to be counted, right? So you're going to see, you know what? So Horace Hogan's making the Hall of Fame. That's great. Brett's making it in again. Jeff Jarrett's making it in the Hall of Fame again. Hell, even I'm going to the Hall of Fame now because I'm a part of the NWO. You know, I have a shirt. I wear the shirt. And when, you know what they say about the NWO. But in any event, even if when you're in the NWO, you're in the NWO for life, the idea that pretty much all of these men have already gotten into the Hall of Fame already. Even of the 4 that they're actually technically inducting, because they were the only 4 in WWE who were part of it, except for Shawn Michaels and Booker T and Big Show. And with Big Show, that's totally deserved, because Big Show was a part of the NWO pretty much from its inception. And it's kind of a shame that they're not adding him into the equation here. And that's something that I really wish that they would do, and probably will not do. But it's something I wish they would do. But he'll get his time. He'll get his time as an individual, and I think that's probably what they're waiting for with that. However, I feel like the Giant is very much a part of NWO's history. He was one of the first, I think, was he number 4? It was either he was number 4 or Ted DiBiase was number 4, but it was like right alongside each other. And I'm pretty sure it was the Giant who came first. It was like, or maybe even been concurrently. But for whatever reason, it's going to be Hogan, Hall, Nash, and Will and Waltman, which is so weird. So how are you inducting Waltman into the NWO for the Hall of Fame, but you're not inducting Show when Show is there for longer, worked longer, was part of all the iterations just as much as Kid was, and that's no knock on Kid. I think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame as well. Sean Waltman, I think he's a tremendous talent. But Big Show should be a part of this. But in any event, it just goes to show that you're going to give people like 6 rings for doing the same amount of work. You know, you don't give Joe Montana a 2nd ring because he was on another team and won. You give it to him because he had it. You know, you give it, because he did the one stint, and his one career was his one Hall of Fame ring. But you're going to give people enough rings to actually get a full fist to punch with. And that's not worth it. It's not worth it. I mean, it's great honoring these people, obviously. Obviously, it's great to honor these guys. But I think the factions need to kind of reel it back in a little bit as far as who they induct. Because the NWO was a big group. You know, I understand the idea of like, oh, it was a great stable, so put them in. But it's not like a tag team. You know, a stable of 4 or 5 or 6, we're talking about, like, okay, I'll give you a good example. The Bill is going in together. You could say what you want about Brie and Nikki's actual in-ring work and how skilled they were and how interesting they were. But from a pure television point of view, they both won championships. They were both trying to hold WWE's women's in-ring work down during the Divas era when there were fewer workers that were decent than there were just models that were doing wrestling. And those of you who know what I'm talking about know the difference. And they tried. Nikki put in the work, and she ended up being a pretty good worker. Brie, not so much. Neither of them were terrific, but I could tell you a couple Nikki Bella matches I actually liked. And Brie was decent. Again, decent. There were some really cringy moments that were rough, but then they transcended into what was ultimately, I think, better for both of them, which was Total Divas and the reality show. And which is what they were there pretty much to do in the first place, but they did get their wrestling chops in, and I think they deserve it. And they were associated with each other as a team for a very long time. You know, do they belong as a tag team with the all-time greats like the Midnight Express? But at the same time, I would more accept Brie and Nikki going in together as a tandem than I do a stable that had at its max like 48 members, which included both the real Sting and the fake Sting. So is fake Sting now in the Hall of Fame? These are the kinds of questions you need to ask. And then, even if not, the 4 that are getting in already have a ring. All of them do. It's so, I don't know. I have mixed emotions about it, because obviously the NWO is fantastic, but it just doesn't, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me knowing that these people are getting 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 to 9 to 10 rings. What really they should do is, if they do these inductions for these groups, like Arn Anderson should have gone in on his own. Same with Tully and same with Barry. But are you going to add Lex Luger into the Horseman's acceptance speech? No, you're not. You're not. You know, you add J.J. Dillon, obviously, but you're not going to add Sid Vicious. Do you get what I'm saying? It's, you can acknowledge these people. Like Tully and Arn could have been a tag team inducted in as the Brainbusters. Boom. There you got it. Barry Windham should be inducted into the Hall of Fame. While we're talking about it, if he's not already, but I don't think he is. I really don't think he is, and he should be. But the point is, factions notwithstanding, this is actually one of the more stacked classes of Hall of Famers, I think, than there's been in recent memory. And we'll see who else gets inducted, because I don't think the list is over. This is just as of right now. So we will keep you updated with the more WWE inductees that come along. What's going to go on with that? And so that brings us to our match of the week. I still don't have a thing for that yet, but we're going to make a thing for that eventually. Our match of the week this week, if you thought my Starrcade 87 dive was something, well, now you are going to have to dive even deeper, because I did not really plan a match, but I have been watching a ton of Mid-South lately. And I'm going to take you guys back to the territory days. This is Mid-South Wrestling. For those of you who don't know, which I expect to be the majority of you, no offense. Mid-South Wrestling was owned by Bill Watts. They ran mostly Louisiana, but they had a couple other places they would kind of branch out to, but not too much, because obviously Dallas and Texas was world-class championship wrestling run by the Von Erichs. And, of course, you got Memphis and Tennessee with Jerry Jarrett and what have you. So Bill Watts is the owner of Mid-South. This is December 3rd, for those of you who are following along on your WWE networks where you can find this. Not trying to plug them, it's where all the footage is. December 3rd, 1983 is known for two specific things. The first was the first official match, or maybe the second. It might have been the second official match of the Midnight Express in Mid-South with a very young Jim Cornette, which is not the match that we're doing, but he's in it. And for those of you who know, I've said it pretty much on every podcast that I am a big fan of Jim Cornette. So that's notable. And he was only a year in the business at that time, because he was asked in at the end of the day, he's terrific, but he was only a year in, but it's amazing all the kind of quips he came up with. And number two was the match that came up. It was a turn for a man known as Crusher Darsow. For those of you who don't know Crusher Darsow, you may also know him as Smash of Demolition, or as Repo Man. That's right. He was Repo Man, but that was, of course, near the end of his time doing that particular thing. But way back in the day, he was known as Crusher Darsow, who was a good-looking guy. He was a big crusher. Obviously, he had great shape. He had a big, like a bear hug, but from the top, he was like basically just stretching him from a backbreaker position. Not like Luger's, but almost like you turn that 90 degrees, like on his shoulder, just wrenching his back on his shoulder. And his name was Crusher Darsow. Well, in this moment, Bill Watts is hyping up this America versus Russia storyline, because this is still 1983. There's still Cold War tension. Not the Olympics in 1980 just happened. Obviously, things are kind of working differently with the Russians going into 1990. However, one of the guys that's one of their heels at this time, one of the better heels, is Nikolai Volkov. And Nikolai Volkov is going one-on-one. This is the match of the night. Is going one-on-one with Dr. Death Steve Williams, who is billed as this guy not straight out of, he had been in it for about a year, but still was really green, was Dr. Death Steve Williams. He billed as this guy, I think he was out of Oklahoma, but he had that great wrestling track, amateur wrestling track record, from college, and Bill Watts was notoriously known for liking actual, I don't want to say this because it's a little disrespectful, but actual wrestling. Actual wrestling, he's a big fan of like the realism of that. And so Bill Watts booked this, and for the past couple of weeks, Crusher Darso had been talking about how he'd been getting new training and how, people had not really appreciated his training up to that point. And the thing is, I really do like this match because it's really more of an angle than a match. It doesn't really, there is a good fight back and forth. Now, for those of you who've ever watched Mid-South or watched these old school territories, there's really not many moves to speak of, right? It starts out with Dr. Death really getting on top of Volkov and really starting to lay the hands in. Volkov's fighting back, and of course, Volkov, even at this time, right before the match, was having the Soviet national anthem played. So that was happening long before, and of course that would get a rain of boos coming in from the crowd, and which it did, and then you get the USA chants. The interesting thing is with WWE's footage of it is you don't really hear the crowd that much. As far as you don't really hear massive boos or massive cheers. It's more of just an energy. You can feel the tension, like the distaste for what's going on. So they feel that you see the kids chanting USA. I was chanting USA, and Dr. Death's obviously the baby face here. He's so jacked at this point. He's massive, dude. And amazingly, this actually started the show. Did this whole situation take place? So Volkov gets, makes a little bit of a fight back, and eventually the referee gets knocked down. Because I think it was an Irish whip, and Dr. Death, or it was Volkov or Dr. Death knocked into the referee goes down. Well, at this time, for those of you who don't know, it was, if you got thrown over the top rope, whoever threw you over the top rope was automatically disqualified. That was one of the rules. You go over the top, you're disqualified. I understand that is really foreign to wrestling fans nowadays. But in the old days, you couldn't do that. You had to keep it in the ring and keep it as fight. There was none of this top rope malarkey that you see, unless it's like a battle royal, in which case that's a different story. Referee gets knocked down. Crusher Darso, who just happened to be watching at this time, he was out there, he was doing his thing. And actually, I take this back. This was the second match on the card. The first match, Crusher Darso destroyed a jobber in not even 90 seconds. It was nothing. So Crusher Darso's still out there. And so Volkov, he's still getting the boos. He throws Dr. Death over the top rope. You're not allowed to do that. Obviously, coming to the aid was Crusher Darso to come in and escort the American-bred Oklahoma boy, USA all-around Dr. Death Steve Williams. And the second he goes to do that, he starts laying in the punches. And Bill Watts is going, oh, he's not coming to help. He's not coming to help at all. What is this with this Crusher Darso? And Darso gets him in the bear hug. And up to this point, Dr. Death had never been defeated. Not once in the entire tenure that Dr. Death had been in Mid-South had he ever been beaten. And now Crusher Darso laying in the bear hug, and he's wearing him down after it looked like Dr. Death had the match won. And he throws in Dr. Death, and immediately Volkov hits his finish, which I don't remember what was at this moment. But it was, I feel bad because I should know. But Volkov hits his finish, and down goes Dr. Death. And then the referee comes to. Volkov gets the cover. It's 1, 2, 3, and that's it. And Bill Watts is shocked, and the boos are raining down as Crusher Darso reveals that he has been allied with the dirty Russians. Oh, those foul 80s Russians like Nikolai Volkov, those no good sons of B-notches. And this is purely entertaining. Totally entertaining. I say what you want about the way that in-ring style is criticized, older in-ring style is criticized for not having a lot of substance. You didn't need it because it was about the storytelling of it all. It was about the who did what and how it drew people in and got people into the match, whether they believed that wrestling was real or not. Back then, it still had a semblance, and they were playing off people's emotions and real-life topics at the time. And this was one of the few times in all of me watching Mid-South that I actually thought that Bill Watts did a decent job on commentary. Most of the time, it sounds like he's falling asleep with a can of Fig Newtons in his mouth. And I mean a can of Fig Newtons. Go find me a can of Fig Newtons. But like with a pack of Fig Newtons, it's like... I didn't mean to focus that much on the Fig Newtons, but... I may get some after this, though. God, this is all loaded with sponsors I did not mean to throw into this. In any event, it was really fun for its territory stuff. So you got to go into it remembering that this is not going to be a spot fest, and you're not going to see a ton of moves. Except for the big things. I mean, hell, Mr. Wrestling 2 later that night won with a really high-rise knee, but damn, it looks convincing. It was a simpler time. It was a better time. And it was a great match to watch. I do recommend watching this. It's second on the card. It's quick. This is like a 4 to 5 minute angle. Because you only had 45 minutes of TV time. So you're trying to get 6 or 7 matches in to one card. You didn't have time to middle around with a bunch of stuff. But this is a 4 to 5 minute angle. It was one of the more prominently featured matches on the card. I definitely liked it because I'm an old school territory guy who really enjoys watching the territories. So if you get a chance, go in and find that little bit of a history lesson. It's a good time. I believe it's a good time. And if nothing else, you can learn about what wrestling is today and what they've taken from that era, if anything. So then we get our Superstar Spotlight. And we're going to close with this. And I'm going to try to be brief. But I promised 2 guys today. And because of their timely win at Elimination Chamber, I'm going to talk about both of them individually and then as a team. Although I will say, both of these men deserve very much their own Superstar Spotlight because they both have very interesting careers. First, we're going to start with John Morrison. And John Morrison, he started out as like Bischoff's lackey. He was named Johnny Nitro because they were kind of going to try to phase. He wanted Nitro to come into the equation as far as Monday Nitro, and it didn't work. He was just trying to suck up to Bischoff, so he came out as Nitro. It wasn't good. So then he was teamed with Joe Mercury and put in his M&M, and then his career was great. M&M was a great team, got him established. They won like 5 or 6 tag titles with it. He had good work in OVW from the limited amount that I've seen of OVW, but it was good nonetheless. They had themselves a great time as M&M. Then as Johnny Nitro, he had a good singles career and started working well with Jeff Hardy in 06. They had some great matches, particularly one I'm thinking about is Unforgiven 06. And I think that started the show that night. I don't remember, but I'm sure somebody will correct me on that. Then he moves on, turns into John Morrison, goes to ECW, wins their title, which, I know it's WWE ECW, but it still meant something at the time. And then he teams up with The Miz, who's the young guy who was the reality show guy turned wrestler, but he always wanted to be a wrestler, and at this point has put the work in and deserves to be a wrestler and deserves respect and credit. And I truly believe, and I understand it's wicked early to be saying this about him, but I believe that The Miz will be a Hall of Famer when he retires. I really do. Speaking of the Hall of Fame. And I hope Morrison too, but we'll have to see how much longer his career goes in WWE and what happens with it. So Morrison then teams up with The Miz and they win several World Tag titles. The Dirt Sheet was very entertaining at a time that there was not a lot of entertaining stuff going on in ECW. They had a fun thing going. And then even when they were doing it on SmackDown and, whatever the case, they had a great match with Carlito and Primo at WrestleMania 25, I think it was, when they unified the tag titles. Well, they didn't. The Colognes did. They did not. They lost. But then John Morrison ends up having a pretty good 2009 fights for the world title. Obviously, we had that as one of our matches of the week. I believe one of our first matches of the week, which was Jeff Hardy and Morrison, which I enjoyed. And then Morrison leaves the business, which is the weirdest thing. For like 3 years, he gets released from WWE and then just takes a step back, and then resurfaces in Lucha Underground. And this was something pretty wild. Lucha Underground really helped Johnny Mundo, I think, come out of his shell, and he did some acting gigs and things along those lines. So it's not like he was just, it's not like he disappeared off the face of the earth. And there was something magical with Lucha Underground, and I'm kind of sad that I missed it. And I know it's very interesting to think that the guy who really likes the territories also happens to like Lucha Underground, because those seem like two very polar opposites. But I think that's one of the joys of being part of the Ruthless Aggression raised individuals, like the tail end of the Attitude Era into the Ruthless Aggression Era. Being raised into that allows you to kind of go back and respect both sides of the spectrum. And especially because Lucha Underground was so unique, it brought something so different to the table. And we'll have to do an episode about Lucha Underground as well. But he really came out of his shell. His actual acting and facials, as well as his in-ring work, improved drastically. He truly was great in that, and during that time he was doing indie promotions, and then he goes to Impact and becomes Johnny Impact and has a great impression there, and he wins their world title and has matches with Austin Aries, controversially, because Austin Aries is Austin Aries. We'll have to have a spotlight about him. That'll be an interesting one. But in many ways, Morrison was truly and is truly captivating, and now here he is back in WWE with The Miz. And all this time that Morrison's doing that, The Miz is back. And he's struggling. But in 2009, then he comes out and he calls out John Cena. And he starts being this really annoying kid who looked like a kid amongst wrestlers, which it might be his only failing ever in WWE, was that he looked smaller and looked younger as far as as far as the larger than life look. Miz didn't really have that for a while. I say he didn't get that until 2015, 2016. I would say 2016. Pretty much when he called out Daniel Bryan and really started getting into really good physical shape and really started to get some of that gristle on him. I think that was the best that the Miz really ever. That was when he started to really transcend that and really do become a star. And now he's got that Miz and Mrs. show I will not watch. I just have no interest in it. I'm sure it's captivating for a certain audience. That audience is not me. But he's obviously made a great life for himself, so go for it. Obviously he's done a lot. He's to some degree become a great ambassador for WWE and what they do. And The Miz, the only failing I think he would have had was to have been pushed before he was ready. As far as the WWE title run with John Cena and The Rock and that whole deal where he retained at Mania against John Cena, but it was because of The Rock and he was just kind of there. I think his title win was premature. I think if they had waited on that until he had really come out of that shell until 2015 or 2016, or even now, I would accept The Miz world champion as The Miz. He's earned it now. I don't think he was ready then. And that's not, I understand that's really up to him to say whether he was ready or not, but that's just my opinion. He wasn't ready. He was pushed a little too fast, but then came back and brought more prestige to the Intercontinental Championship than pretty much anyone in the last 7 or 8 years has. Save for maybe Cody when he did it, but even then he wasn't that big of a deal, as opposed to, I think The Miz really made the Intercontinental Championship something again, and you could say what it is now, because somebody like The Miz is not holding it, which may or may not change. But The Miz has earned my respect. He had a great match with Dolph Ziggler in 2016. He's had quality matches when he did the Entourage. He was entertaining. He had a great triple threat with Seth and Finn a couple years back. He's earned every bit of what he's gotten. And I do really respect The Miz for the hard work he's put in to be what he is now. And Miz and Morrison are both worthy of respect. They really are. And I really do appreciate both of them for their contributions. And I'm excited to see where they go now as they continue their reign as SmackDown Tag Team Champions. So with that said, my throat is getting sore. We have talked a lot, as I foresaw we would. So we are going to have to take our first commercial break. I know these commercial breaks are very long, but we have a lot of commercials. And those commercials aren't even the subtle plugs that I'm throwing in from my own personal merchandise. But if you do like the AB Productions CT Facebook page, but don't forget to like this page. Let's go back to this page. This page, Court Martial Podcast, we got a new series coming. It's called The Drive-By. We're going to talk to you about that. We're going to have that aired, hopefully. We're going to have the first one aired on either Sunday or Monday, and then we're going to have the second one aired on Tuesday or Wednesday, because I was behind on recording these and I didn't release the one I released this past week, because I was just busy with too much stuff. So in the event, we are going to have 2 episodes of The Drive-By happening concurrently, basically. And then from then on, we're going to further develop and establish what that's going to entail on a weekly basis. But with that said, we have to take a commercial break. Stay tuned, because we got drive-bys coming up, and of course, another Court Martial Podcast. Stay safe, stay healthy. We will be right back after these messages.